Was that somebody wanting to be admitted? No. All right, where'd my share go? This is more general, not general license, but is general operating methods. So operating courtesy, a little bit about band plans, how to avoid interference, quite a bit on emergency operations and races, contesting, uh, QSLing, mesh networks, and remote operation. Anybody do it remote? It's kind of neat. Although the good one, you have to pay so much a minute. Yeah. The free one, stations available aren't too great. Somebody's 7,300 somewhere with a dipole. The other ones that you pay for so much a minute, is 1,500 watt with, Yagi arrays and stuff like that. You should always be courteous. And try to avoid interference with other users. Ask if the frequency is in use on CW or send a QRL on phone, send a QRL on CW. Make sure you follow the voluntary band plan and be in the subband that you're supposed to be, whether it's CW or phone. And I'm not sure why they put that one in there, but avoid CW on the FT8 subband. It kind of messes up FT8, I assume.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard any CW in that little 3 kilohertz.
Close, but yeah, usually hear on the 58 signal.
Yeah, all you hear it.
Yeah.
How can you avoid harmful interference on an apparently clear frequency before calling CQ or on CW or phone? Which of the follow? Huh? You didn't get that one?
I said no.
But you were wrong.
That can't be.
Delta is QSY. Let's go to another frequency.
Oh. Actually, none of those answers the purpose. I remember the book said we listen first, then ask them to use. Yeah. Which was kind of B, isn't it? Yeah. They got.
Well, they assume you're listening.
Okay.
And it sounds clear, but you still should ask.
Yeah.
I think that's that's their point. Which of the following complies good amateur practice in choosing a frequency?
Oh, there it is.
Whoops. Back to my.
Double tap again. Did you get a new mouse?
No, I'm trying to make it through before I spend $30 on a wireless mouse.
Didn't see any for sale.
If it really starts bad, I've got one with a wire.
Ooh. Okay.
Old school. Okay, didn't you get this one? Oh, okay. I guess there's a DX window. Their example is in the 6-meter band from 50.1 to 50.25. And then, of course, the DX thing about owning stations outside the contiguous 48 or the lower 48, whichever way you want to refer to it. So what is the voluntary band plan restriction for US stations transmitting within the 48 contiguous states in the 50.1 to 50.125? And that's different than what I had in the previous slide. This is probably correct, and the other one probably a typo. Because I copied these right out of the question pool.
It's one of those ones that you're really careful you can get it wrong with it.
Yeah.
Just flip it around, you know.
You want to make sure that you have enough separation between other stations. So if you're doing single sideband, you want to maintain at least 3 kilohertz because that's the bandwidth of the sideband. And for CW, 150 to 500. I guess that also depends on your sending speed. I guess people doing 50 words per minute might be getting up to 500 hertz. I don't know. I could probably get 50 hertz.
I would never know.
When selecting an SSB transmitting frequency, what minimum separation should be used to minimize interference? When selecting CW, what's the minimum separation? Propagation conditions can change. So all of a sudden, you are getting interference from a distant station that, you know, you couldn't hear before. So you should try to somehow mitigate the problem with the other station, or just move your contact to another station, do a QSY, I guess. What is good amateur practice if propagation changes during a contact and you notice interference from other stations on the frequency? Now, there's some people on 40 and 80 that would do alpha.
Yeah, this is my frequency.
What is good amateur practice if propagation changes during a contact and you notice interference from other stations on the frequency? Yeah. No one owns any frequency, not even the nets, although
Oh, man.
I suspect that.
Oh, yeah, I've heard them get really nasty. Yeah.
That's right. But of course, I guess if you're there first, I don't know, but you're supposed to be courteous. So yeah, there's more people on the net that you should probably move. The only exception is emergencies where all bets are off. If there's life endangered or property, basically you can do anything that you're capable of, even unlicensed. Which of the following is true concerning access to frequencies? If you do have somebody that has an emergency and they're breaking in, you should acknowledge the station and see what kind of assistance you can provide, whether it's calling 911 for them or whatever, or getting in your boat to go get them off the roof. What's the first thing you should do if you're communicating with another amateur station and hear a station in distress breaking in. There's a thing called RACES, the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. It was created by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. You have to be a licensed amateur and be certified by, and it's never been clear, it always says a civil defense agency, but I don't know who that is. Is there only one? I started doing some of the courses for RACES, but I never did them all, so. Who may be the control operator of an amateur station transmitting in RACES to assist relief operations during a disaster? Yeah, they didn't put the part in about the civil defense certification.
Yeah, I was wondering, unless that person's there, and you're just the control operator. That's gonna be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
But of the answers there, that's the appropriate one.
Yeah, that's, okay.
And like I said before, you can use any means at your disposal, any frequency or any mode. You don't have to be licensed. It does need to be an emergency, so I assume if you're doing it and it's not a real emergency, you might be in trouble. The Part 97 thing specifies the kind of messages that are sent through RACES. They also allow drills and tests for the operations not to exceed 1 hour per week, which seems odd. But we don't do RACES in Merritt Island, but we do an emergency thing once a month. And I guess it lasts an hour or two. How often may RACES training drills and tests be routinely conducted without special authorization? A lot of times they'll set up a net for RACES and practice operations. And one of the things that they recommend is to set a backup frequency for the net. So in case there's an issue with that frequency or something, or the equipment, you have another frequency to operate the net on. Which of the following is good amateur practice for net management? Contesting. There you go. Oh, yeah. Oh, at noon?
One, but I think it does start at noon.
Yeah, I think the KSC club was starting at noon.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff, I think
It's supposedly one of the most popular activities in amateur radio. And that's probably true. There's probably more people into contesting than the other aspects. And obviously the goal is to make as many contacts within the given time period, and any other constraints, like it may limit you to certain modes or bands, like if it's a CW contest or a RIDI or one of those.
We have people in our club that would take issue with that statement that about the goal.
Okay, what is,
They would say the goal is to make the most points.
well, isn't that almost the same?
No.
Oh, because you get more points depending on where it is.
You get multiplier points, CW gets more points than phone and so forth, and DX sometimes gets more points than local, and they only go for the points.
And then multi-station gets
Well,
more or less.
well, if there's multipliers involved, you go for the multiplier station. But, I mean, it's drives me crazy. I just want to make a lot.
Somebody else figure it out.
Yeah,
You don't want necessarily want to win, just,
I want to have a good time.
okay. You have to have a log in order to verify your results. And
Yeah, it's usually end with it.
well, that's, the program. But the log, now they insist that you submit a digital file for the log in Cabrillo format. Now, most of the actual log programs themselves, I think, use ADIF,
Yeah.
which is coming up. What is Cabrillo format? I just did.
Oh, alphabet.
That hurt. It was ADIF is one.
Work bands, that's the World Amateur Radio Commission or something. But it's the kind of weird ones, 30, 17, and 12. Although not as weird as 60.
Okay. 60 should be.
Well, it's not really ours.
No,
We're secondary. Most contests don't allow work bands. Why is that?
From what I understand, that they want to leave something open for the people that are not contesting to use.
Oh, okay.
When they're contesting, they just take over everything.
Yeah, all right. From which of the following bands is amateur radio contesting generally excluded? Another prohibited practice is self-spotting, where you post your own call sign and frequency on a call sign spotting network. And where you're supposed to have somebody else post your thing.
And this is for contest.
Yeah, I guess it's associated with contesting.
It's not when you're doing voting.
Do you self-spot on POTA? No. Good enough. If you're doing VHF or UHF contests, it's normally single sideband and not FM. So you normally expect to find people operating down in the lower weak signal segment, down with the close to the FT8s and things. And the calling frequency, which for 2 meters is 144.1. I learned that yesterday. We got some people interested in trying to do some single sideband on 2 meters. We haven't done it yet. During a VHF UHF contest, in which band segment would you expect to find the highest level of single sideband or CW activity?
Bob, excuse me a minute. There's a regular 2-meter single sideband net Monday nights up here in run from Titusville, but it has people from many states involved.
Yeah, I heard about that one.
So easy enough to join in.
Okay. So soon as I get my antenna up. But the problem is I'm gonna be vertical, so it's probably not gonna work well.
I use vertical. It does okay. I don't have my Yagi up yet, but the vertical's doing pretty good.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give it a shot. Did we do this one?
think it's probably-
Take it's Chuck. If you're working DX, I guess this is Dan's territory, right? You need to know the protocol or etiquette. So you're only supposed to send your call sign once or twice and then somehow let the DX station pick you out of the pileup. How well does that work? I would think if you weren't a hard to get station or a popular one or something, you might never get.
It's hard. That's where the big Yagis with gain, directional gain, and one that have kilowatt amplifiers.
How should you generally identify your station when attempting to contact a DX station during a contest or in a pileup? Split mode, you can basically set it up to transmit on one frequency and listen on another. And it's called split operation. Imagine that. It doesn't require dual receivers, just dual VFO or switching VFO from transmit to receive different frequencies. They claim it allows a DX station who may be in a country where they're transmitting on a frequency that's not allowed in the US band plan. So you could hear them, but you couldn't talk to them on that frequency. So in split mode, you could set it up where you're transmitting on a legal US frequency that they could listen to. Seems like an odd.
How does that get, how do you know that if they're running split or not?
Well,
How much, how far, where is the other frequency?
They'll state it,
yeah, I don't.
receiving on the station, Elvis frequency,
So they send that,
they say.
well, we're talking CW or phone or both.
Either, yeah. Somehow you have to set it up, but since you can't talk to them on that frequency, I don't know if there's some. It's a good question. But somebody decided it was worth a question in the pool, though. Why do DX stations often transmit and receive on different frequencies? After you've made contact, you may want to get a confirmation with a QSL card. Although probably most of them today are electronic QSL cards, but you still get paper ones. In order to get some of the, Logbook of the World and I think EQSL, some of those have these awards you can get by working all continents, working all states. The 13 colonies thing comes up once a year, a bunch of those. And you can, get a little certificate you can print out and you get a little sign you can put on your QRZ page. One of the things they also use is what they call a QSL bureau, where they kind of bundle up requests for cards. From what I understand, in a lot of cases, that may be 6 months before they actually send a batch. Which of the following contacts may be confirmed through the logbook of the world? Which of the following file formats is used for exchanging amateur radio log data? It's more about the QSL Bureau. And they say it can take a year or more. I guess that's possible. I don't know. I have never done it. And then there's a QSL manager you can possibly have that handles the sending and receiving of the QSL cards. Anybody use a QSL manager? Anybody use a QSL bureau?
Well, I've received them.
Okay. What's the function of a DX QSL manager? Yeah, bravo. Mesh network. These are normally set up in the 2.4 gigahertz, although I think sometimes they use 5 because that's the other public band, mostly used by cell phones and remote control also uses 2.4, where, as I understand it, they use a standard commercial router and load some custom firmware in it to make it into a mesh network where it can look for other stations and make connections with them to set up the mesh. Now, how you communicate between the different routers, I guess, is not a standard thing. I've heard they use, was it LoRa, whatever. We can go some few kilohertz, kilometers. I'm not aware of any mesh networks around here, but there may be.
What are they using?
Well, one of the things they use them for coming up later is the AREDN network, which is a mesh network, they claim.
Oh, what's it do?
It's for emergency services.
Oh,
I know we had a request at KSC to put a mesh network antenna on top of the VAB, which didn't go far. It was a commercial company. It wasn't amateur. Wouldn't have mattered. Getting another antenna on top of the VAB is
it's big crap.
problematic.
Hmm.
It's not so much the physical space, it's the frequency space, getting a frequency allocation. And there's lots of other antennas up there that are not amateur. There's an interference issue. So amateur is probably tertiary, not secondary. They use this discovery and link establishment so they can look for other stations and then actually make a connection between them. So, this station A finds B, B may find C and D, and each one of those may find 1 or 2 or 3 others, and pretty soon, you cover a wide geographic area. Kind of like SARNet, except I don't think SARNet, I guess, is kind of a mesh network, but it doesn't use routers and same
So
thing.
this for sending packet data,
Yeah,
not.
right. Or SARNet is analog voice. But, and it's connected, I think, through a direct communications between towers. Because I think there's a couple hundred routers in SARNet. And it covers the whole state and a little bit into Georgia. So you can get all over the state on SARNet, except they really want to use it for emergency services. They don't like you just talking on it.
So that's mesh network is for emergency.
The AREDN one is, but you could set up your own mesh network just for people in the area. Like I said, I don't know that we have one. Definitely not in Merritt Island. I don't know about Melbourne. Maybe Chuck knows.
No, don't know.
What type of equipment is commonly used to implement an amateur radio mesh network? Which of the following frequencies can be used for amateur radio mesh networks? Uh, Internet connections will allow you, well, to do a lot of things. Digital voice is one of them. Remote control of remote transmitters, where you do it over the internet. And you can actually set it up. You can use a USB encoder, so you can actually tune it. You know, have a tuning knob right there on your laptop. I tried it a couple times. It's kind of interesting, but like I said, the free one didn't really give me any equipment better than what I already had. It's just in a different place. So if you want to operate in another country, like Gary does, but in some of those cases, you have to be licensed in that country to do it.
If you're like 50 miles away from your home QTH, it doesn't count though, I thought that's it.
What's that?
Every time you make a contact, you say, here's my home QTH from Florida, but from Georgia, I didn't think you could do that. Like if I travel to,
Well, within the US, you can remote control to anybody else in the US.
right, so if you connect to a station in Wyoming, you make a bunch of contacts with people in Alaska, do they count towards contacts though? Or awards? Because I
I don't know.
thought,
Well,
I thought you had to be within 50 miles of your home QTH for it to count.
I don't know. I know for a lot of those, like you're talking about, worked all states and countries
Yeah.
and stuff. The only thing that gets reported is the frequency and the time. I don't even think there's a signal report. But, you know, it has to be verified with the other end
Yeah, we confirmed, yeah.
on Logbook of the World or
Yeah.
one of them.
I mentioned before that this weekend, if you're sitting in Georgia, that would be kind of cheating, wouldn't it?
Yeah. If we go to Alaska, we might be lying in Alaska.
Now that's DX.
But I mean, it's supposed to be, you can't say you're in Florida if you're not in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, was you in Florida or is transmitter? We have a guy in the club, well, we have some guys in the club that, can remotely operate their stations. And passed it down here in Melbourne, but his station is in Connecticut.
Yeah.
I do that on business travel because I can remote it in a machine here and operate normally. and I think I'm legit, but if I take the machine with me to Wyoming or whatever,
Then you're portable, well,
be able to portable, yeah, it's like, well,
Well, and the real key one here though is you don't have to add an indicator if you're in the US. And transmitters in the US. Whereas if you're operating outside the US, then you have to use the foreign call sign / yours, I think, something like that.
In many of those cases, you have to be an extra class license for the other country to allow you to have a call.
That's correct also. Depends on the country, but yeah, in most cases. Now, like Canada, we have kind of a reciprocal thing. I'm not sure about all the other countries. So what indicators required to be used by US licensed operators when operating a station via remote control and the transmitter is in the US? What indicates the delay between a control operator action and the corresponding change in the transmitted signal? I didn't talk about that, but it should be obvious.
sure.
We talked about courtesy on sending a QRL or asking if the frequency is in use. Some band plan restrictions, only making contact outside the US, 48 states if it's DX. Some ways to avoid interference. What to do if you're have a contact going on and propagation changes and you get interference from another station. Nobody owns a frequency in theory, except for emergency operations. You can do anything. A RACES control operator can be any person holding an FCC license. Of course, they have to have the appropriate class depending on the band that they're operating. You can have drills, emergency drills and tests of no more than 1 hour a week and have practice nets recommended to have a backup frequency to operate. Contesting, you need digital log files using the Cabrillo format. They normally, I missed a space, normally exclude the work bands from contests. VHF, UHF contests are normally single sideband or CW, so they're down in the weak signal segment or down 144.1 or below. If you're doing DX, you just send your call sign once or twice. You can operate in split mode so that a distant station can be transmitting on a frequency you're not allowed to transmit on, and you can receive it and you transmit on a legal one. And not sure how you manage that, but in theory. Logbook of the world is one of the big logging things, so it takes care of special events and US to non-US contacts and things like worked all states. There's a bunch of them they actually have. The log formats are typically in what's called ADIF, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for, some sort of interchange file. QSL managers and bureaus. Mesh networks, of which I'm not sure we have any, and remote operation, where you send your call sign. You have to take into account the latency, depending where the transmitter is. If it's in Florida, it's not a big deal. If it's over in Australia, then you're going to have a little bit of latency. That's one of them Gary does, because he's got an Australian license and he operates a transmitter over there. In fact, he was telling a story about one of the first contacts he made, and there was a couple guys talking, and they were in Melbourne, and they asked him where he was, and he said Melbourne. And they got to explain he was in Melbourne, Florida.